This is an ABC News special report.
Hello, I'm George Stephanopoulos at ABC News headquarters in New York, and we're interrupting your regular program to bring you breaking news in the Casey Anthony trial. She is, of course, the 25-year-old mother in Florida accused of killing her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee, back in 2008. The trial's gone on for 47 days, 33 days of testimony that has fascinated so much of the nation, and the jury has reached a verdict quickly. Just a little over 10 hours of deliberations beginning yesterday. I'm joined by our legal analyst, Dan Abrams. And Dan, in these capital cases, a quick verdict usually means guilty.
I think based on the evidence that was presented in this case, this is not a good sign for Casey Anthony's defense team. I think this is a that would have been pleased if the jurors had taken longer to go through all of the evidence, to consider where there might be reasonable doubt, etc. I think that right now you've got a very nervous defense team and a very nervous Casey Anthony.
Let's listen to the courtroom. Judge Belvin Perry. Judge Belvin Perry, Jr. reading the documents from the jury. Casey facing trial on 7 counts, including first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter, several counts of providing false information to law enforcement.
Will the defendant rise along with counsel? Madam Clerk, you may publish the verdicts.
Judge. In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, State of Florida versus Casey Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of aggravated manslaughter of a child, verdict as to count 3, we the jury find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, dated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 4. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 5. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict as to count 6. We, the jury, find the defendant We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson. As to the charge of providing false information to a law enforcement officer, verdict is to count 7. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of providing false information to a law enforcement officer as charged in the indictment. So say we all, dated Orlando, Orange County, Florida, this 5th day of July 2011, signed foreperson.
Madam Clerk, you may poll the jury.
Yes. Juror number 1, were these your true and correct verdicts? Pardon? Juror number 1, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Not guilty.
Were they all your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number 2, were these your true and correct verdicts?
Yes.
Juror number
Jury
3,
being
were these
polled
your
right now,
two
and
correct
a
verdicts?
stunning
Yes.
verdict here
Juror number
in the
4,
case of
were these
Casey
your
Anthony,
true
not
correct
guilty of
verdicts?
first-degree
Yes.
murder, not
Number
guilty of
5,
aggravated
were these
child
your
abuse,
true
not
correct
guilty
verdicts?
of aggravated manslaughter. You heard she will be guilty of several counts of providing false statements to law enforcement officers. But Dan Abrams, you and I did exactly the same thing when those verdicts were read. Our jaws dropped.
Well, I can tell you that almost everyone who was covering this case from the beginning thought this was going to be a question of what she would be convicted of, not whether. And put aside the giving false information to law enforcement. She conceded that in the defense. She admitted she gave false statements. So that was a given. But when it comes to the first-degree murder, the aggravated child abuse, the aggravated manslaughter, the question that many had was simply what she would be convicted of.
And there is Casey Anthony in tears, being led out of the courtroom. She's with her lawyer there, now facing the judge.
Casey Marie Anthony, the jury of your peers, having found you not guilty as to the charge contained in count 1 of the indictment, murder in the first degree, at this time I will adjudge you to be not guilty. As to count 2, the crime of aggravated child abuse, a jury of your peers having found you to be not guilty, the court will adjudge you to be not guilty of the crime contained in count 2. As to count 3, aggravated manslaughter of a child, a jury of your peers having found you not guilty, I will adjudge you to be not guilty of that count. As to counts 4, 5, 6, and 7, providing false information to a law enforcement officer, I will adjudge you to be guilty of those counts in order that you be fingerprinted here in open court at this time.
And Dan Abrams, the standard here for the jury, if they had any reasonable doubt if she was guilty, they had to find her not guilty. That's what they did.
Unlike in a civil case where the question simply is, do you believe there's more evidence than not?
It has to be an open court.
That's not the standard in a criminal case. The standard in a criminal case is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And that must have been where the jurors ended up falling, was simply saying that there is reasonable doubt.
So even though there was devastating testimony of Casey Anthony partying for days while her daughter had disappeared, they couldn't, all they had was a circumstantial case for the cause of death.
And you have to wonder how much the testimony of her mom helped her, which is that, yes, she testified for the prosecution, but by the end of this case, you saw Cindy Anthony, the mother, in effect testifying for the defense. The prosecutors would say she lied on behalf of her daughter.
Saying she had done those searches of chloroform on the computer.
Right, which was the premeditation in this case. So it is very possible these jurors looked at Cindy Anthony and said to themselves, my goodness, if she's testifying on behalf of the defense, maybe there are questions here.
And Dan, as we continue to talk, let's take another look now at the video of Casey Anthony as the verdicts read not guilty.
Day of July 2000.
Most emotion she showed throughout this trial, right there.
It really is a stunning, we say this sometimes, it's a stunning verdict when it really isn't. This really is a stunning verdict to those who are watching the case. I mean, you talk to the people who are sitting in that courtroom every day, and the vast majority of them will tell you that the fact that there was no conviction on any of the more serious charges here is very surprising to court watchers who observed this case from the beginning.
Once again, Casey Anthony, not guilty of first-degree murder, not guilty of aggravated child abuse, not guilty of manslaughter. We're going to return you now to your regular program. We're going to have full-team coverage of the Casey Anthony verdict tonight on World News with Diane Sawyer, also later on Nightline. And, of course, we're tracking all the developments in the Casey Anthony case throughout the day at abcnews.com. Dan Abrams, thanks very much.
Sentencing is on Thursday.
Sentencing is on Thursday, and thank you all for joining us.
This has been a special report from ABC News.